Three, two, one. Just make sure this thing's actually working, because that would be spectacular.
Yep, it's working. I can see myself. I don't like seeing myself, but I can see myself.
If I really want to make myself choke on water, I can retell the story of what happened when I first joined this evening, but you know.
Let's not. That was not fun, man.
What do you mean? It was very fun. Entertainment at its finest.
Starting to not like you, Morgan.
Mm-hmm. It's typical. Wait for a few people here. What was this one? 4.7. Some of which were pretty deep. So that's fun. Wait for a few people to get in here. I'm gonna share the link. Are you sharing the link, Greg, to the Facebook page? Or
if you send me a link, I could share it too real quick.
Wah. Hang on. Copy link address. I'll copy link address someday when my computer decides to not jump off a cliff. Okay.
Let's see here.
Thank you, Kyle. Very cool.
What happened?
Your phone buzzed. Wait a sec.
Wasn't me.
That was your phone. I can't confirm. There was a 5.5 and a 5.4. Huh.
I'm looking at the USGS.
They actually... I closed my USGS page, which is just spectacular.
I'm looking at them on here.
Okay. Settings. 7 days significant.
A 4.6 just happened not long ago.
Oh yeah, about an hour ago. It's just it's near the Loyalty Islands as well. You're getting some stuff near Greece and the Mediterranean, so there might be some activity over there too that we can cover later on.
All right. I guess we could bring up tonight. We might have a black ice event here, since the roads are all wet. Temperatures are dropping.
Oh yeah, that's another thing we can note.
We should definitely mention that tonight.
So, we can get into it momentarily. We don't have a lot to cover in this episode, so we can take our time a little bit more than usual. Craig, I cannot hear you. I think your mic is dying again.
Might help if I turn it on. All right, this night's starting off to a good one. Guys, this might be more of a comedy show more than a weather podcast, but
At least it won't be dull this time.
all right.
Great start here. Oh, Lord.
Last time I watched it, I had it muted and just playing, so you get a view.
You see how much he supports us, guys? Not much.
Well, it's kind of boring.
All right, well, this podcast is gonna be interesting. I can't even speak tonight. Nice.
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 Anyway,
No,
when
my
Kyle
thing is-
when Kyle decides to exist again, we'll get going.
He's like Bigfoot. You see him and then you don't.
I'm not watching it on YouTube because it's gonna re-echo on us.
Yeah,
I've already got it open, bud.
that would
All right,
suck.
cool. You're covered.
Anywho,
You got
welcome
covered.
back to another, I was about to say American, United Weather Network podcast. Craig, my name's Morgan, that's Craig and Kyle below me.
Mm-mm-mm.
And today we're going to be talking about, well, our main focus of conversation, as my Facebook notification goes off, the main focus of conversation today is going to be the uptick in Pacific Ridge activity seismically. So the uptick in earthquakes recently near the Loyalty Islands, that would be south and east of Indonesia, as well as up the east coast of Japan. The uptick in activity means that the lack of activity at this point showing up in the United States ridges, up and along the San Andreas, up through Alaska, the lack of activity is showing that we are overdue for some kind of activity up and around there. So we're going to get into that this evening. Hope y'all are having a good evening tonight. I'll go through this quickly, and then we'll go through
Hold on.
the...
Are we just going to ignore that you just randomly came from Australia for a second?
Did I sound like I was coming from...
Tonight?
Oh, well, that's...
G'day, mate.
That's just natural to me. I don't know, actually. I don't know. But anyway, we'll discuss this briefly, and then I'll go into models. Greg, you can cut this. And I'll go into models, and then I'll hand it back to Kyle, in which he'll go in depth a little bit more about the quakes. So, just to briefly explain this, we have an uptick in strong earthquake activity going on south and east of the Loyalty Islands. So you're seeing quake values on the Richter scale of 4.7, 5.5, 4.9, 5.2, 5.3. Most importantly, 6.2, 5.9, 5.4. These kinds of quakes are they're pretty strong following the 7.7 quake that struck the area a couple of weeks ago. So the uptick in activity is continuing, and it's starting to spread towards areas like Indonesia, Papua New Guinea. So you're seeing 5.2, 4.9 quakes like that. And then about a week ago, if we're looking off the coast of Japan, if we scroll the age all the way out of these quakes, we can see there was indeed a strong earthquake of 7.2 right in here, which explains the bigger circles. So a lot of a lot of activity currently going on along the Pacific Ridge that we're going to need to monitor as it starts to head up towards the north and east, and it could potentially have an impact along the San Andreas line. But
And so
that'll...
it begins.
Oh, hell yeah. So that'll be what Kyle will discuss, but briefly, we're going to go through the models, and isn't actually a lot to cover this week. The main thing that we were focusing on last week was the potential for a big severe weather event, which would have been yesterday, And that very much so did not happen. So there really isn't a lot at this point to look at. We'll scroll through it slowly.
The ice storms were pretty substantial.
The ice storms were indeed very substantial, and there were a few reports of upwards of 3/4 of an inch of sleet or ice in areas like Maryland, and I saw one in Virginia as well. So that's all things to keep in mind. I'm going to reload my GFS page because it's deciding to die.
We actually had sleet here today in Sussex County.
Up here in northeastern
briefly
Jersey.
changed to snow.
Yeah, up here in northeast Jersey where I reside, we have a glaze of ice and about 6 inches of snow. I had school. Looking through it, we'll see that a high pressure starts to take place over the majority of the eastern United States. Stronger one that's going to really set in a very dry, seasonable, and cold temperature for the month of February. So that will be going later into the weekend. That's going to be something that we're going to have to take into account for the beginning of next week. Moving through the week, we can see a little MCS starts to drift through the plains into the Midwest, bringing some lighter snow and lighter rain to areas like Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, closer to the Great Lakes eventually. That really isn't anything of significance. Could start to see a little uptick in intensity as it gets towards Tennessee Valley, as it starts to approach the Appalachian Mountains and the Piedmonts of North Carolina and South Carolina. As that moves through, it shouldn't be anything of significance. Should be just some heavier rain for those areas, which they don't need, but it's not anything too significant. High pressure starts to take place over the Gulf of Mexico, actually. You can see 1021 there, millibars. And that'll set in for a little bit of a colder pattern in and around there for midweek. As you move along after that, the high pressure continues to send. High pressure sits in over the majority of the lower 48, over the continuous 48 states. Little lake effect, snow or rain might start to impact the areas of Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, and New York. That'll be coming Wednesday night into Thursday morning. Could affect the morning commute potentially, and in a very small degree. After that, high pressure again starts to set in for the majority of the northern continuous 48 states. And we start to see a little bit of unsettled conditions start to set in over Texas and Dixie Alley. As we see there, something starts to form to the tune of a weak MCS. So the potential for winter weather, again, for areas that just received 3/4 of an inch of ice this week, could definitely still be there for a second time around coming at the end of the week. Now, this shows it as more snow, and heavy snow at that. Yikes. Going into Friday, that would be for the Carolinas, extending through most of the southeastern United States, obviously excluding Florida. Then that pushes off majority snow for areas like North Carolina, who have seen a lot of snow already due to some other winter storms, particularly in the northern portions of the state. Then some troughing starts to take place in the middle of the plains. So see something start to dip in terms of the isobars. That won't be anything too significant. So you can see pretty widespread lighter snow and rain in these areas. Something may get picked up from the moisture in Dixie Alley. However, that shouldn't be anything too significant. That is next weekend. And then as the low pushes off towards the north and east, gets a little bit stronger with a little bit more increased precipitation as you get off towards the Appalachian Mountains up there and into Maine. However, other than that, it should be offshore by the time really any impacts could be of any kind of significance. After that pushes out, high pressure starts to set in once again for most of the country. A low pressure starts to dive in a little bit, and you can see an isolated trough extending out, with the high pressure continuing to sit over the east coast of the United States. So really two highs shoving in the trough, which could potentially get picked up by moisture, which the GFS wants to indicate for a brief period. Then that cuts off into some separate weaker system that moves off the coast of New York City and then moves up towards the White Mountains into Portland, Maine. Could potentially bring some lighter snow or rain up to that area. But then, as you get towards the end of the run, high pressure really starts to set in over the entirety of the country. Only areas really seeing any kind of precip are the higher elevations of the northwestern United States. Really not much of significance to note over this new model run. Obviously, the precip in California is stuff to note, so the storms are going to be persistent over there. But really, other than that, really nothing too significant that we're looking at for the next few weeks over the lower 48 states. Yeah. All right. At this point, we really don't have a lot to talk about that, so I'm going to turn it over to Kyle, in which he's going to start talking about the earthquakes a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Morgan. I was just going to say, at the end of what you just all explained there, that's the pattern shift. So that's when we're going to see how the next pattern, we have to wait a little bit, and then we'll see how things get for the beginning of March.
Yeah, we're going to get a bit of settled weather, and then we're really going to get into that spring pattern in which the analogs are showing to be pretty bad. So we're really going to have to monitor that closely and what the analogs continue to show and what further range runs start to show for Dixie Alley.
Oh, yeah, definitely. All right, so going back into the earthquakes, as Morgan was digging into earlier, we've had a few large earthquakes out there along the western and southern edges of the Pacific ring of fire out there. And then that energy should transfer all the way across the Pacific Ocean, eventually to the Pacific Northwest. So regions like Oregon, California, Washington State could see some action here in over the next week or so. It takes usually about a week to 10, maybe 12 days for it to transfer all the way from the southern side over to the northern edge of the Pacific Ring of Fire. And you can see we're already starting to get some small action along the California coast out there. I can't tell, is that onshore or offshore?
Some of them are onshore, some of them are off. So the ones that are off are a tad bit stronger, so 3.9, 3.2, and then onshore 3.7, 3.4, 3.1, 3.0. So and looking into it, I did a little bit of research before this. Some of them are dig sites, but some of them are also not. So the stronger ones are not from dig sites, but the 3.0, 3.1s are.
Okay.
And
yeah,
something
so we're getting...
something to just note before we get behind this 4.2 is from a drill point. This is not natural. This is from a dig site. This is a shallower earthquake. It's really just it's a fuel site. So it's crude oil site. So it's not natural. It's just something that happened to register stronger than most others, even though it was relatively shallow.
Right. And that's at 4.2 over Oklahoma, correct?
Indeed.
Okay. Yeah, so basically the strong ones are occurring on the western edge of the Pacific Ring of Fire, which basically encompasses all the way from, portions of the United States and goes all the way around to Alaska, wraps back around to the Philippines, Japan area, all the way down to Australia, and then back up towards South America. So when we see action going on in one place, that energy is going to transfer around to the other side of the plate, as that would just make sense. Like, if you have two objects, one runs into it, it's going to eventually drift and hit something else. So that's why we're going to see some sort of uptick along the Northwest American continent.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's not within the next few months.
Yeah, I mean,
it could.
Yeah, I'd say within like 14 to 20 days, we should see a good solid earthquake hit somewhere to the north of where it's either going to go north, or it could even transfer a little bit towards the west, and then you can get them big ones out in areas like what's that called out there? The Middle East, like Afghanistan, Pakistan.
Yeah,
they get some big quakes as well when you see action along the southern Pacific rim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like right along that line there, you can see
Yeah,
them
so
all.
you can see that they're actually seeing some kind of
5.4 here. There's also
tremors.
5.5 in the Mediterranean, so there's definitely
Exactly.
activity spreading around the plate. Something to note as well, we got the 7.2 a few days to a week ago, so it could be a signal of some of the energy starting to transfer. What I've really started to pick
Mhm.
up on is we need another strong quake to signify really the movement of
Right.
energy start to occur. So really, if we're not seeing over the next 14 to 20 days, we really should see another 7, potentially 8, near the Loyalty Islands where all these quakes have been occurring. If we don't start to see that, that's a bit of a worry because it might mean pressure is starting to build up in these areas and it could lead to more drastic effects.
I was gonna
Obviously,
say,
yeah.
was that a close? Was that a shallow or a deep one?
The 7.2
I didn't have it on
was
here.
7.2 was about
Yeah.
50 kilometers, I think.
Okay, because they're having a lot of small ones right now, all about 10 kilometers deep. The last one was about 5 days ago. That was at 107 kilometers deep. Then they had a 6.1 at 12 kilometers deep around the Loyalty Islands where that major earthquake occurred. So you can see it's still hitting around a 6.
Indeed. So the 7.1 here, depth of 50 kilometers. So that meant impacts at the surface were not as drastic. You didn't really have as much of a tsunami threat posed.
Right.
However, it was still pretty strong because 7.1 is pretty strong. What we're going to, the trend that I've been picking up on is the shallower earthquakes are going to be the more drastic at the surface. So the shallower earthquakes mean that the more that more of the impact is going to come at the surface, less so below the Earth's core. And in this case, if we're talking about a deep earthquake, you want it let me rephrase that. We're talking about a larger earthquake, you want it to be deeper because that'll minimize a couple things. A, that'll minimize the threat at the surface, and B, that will also limit the tsunami threat that could be posed with some sort of earthquake of that magnitude. Now, as of late, we have been very fortunate in terms of tsunami threats. So over the summer, we had a 7.1 off Alaska's coastline that generated, I think, a 1.5 foot wave. The 7.7 near the Loyalty Islands did not generate anything. But as we get towards the next few weeks to months, we're going to need to monitor that for stronger earthquakes. If the stronger earthquakes can manage to be a little bit more shallow, we could have a threat to life and property in the form of a tsunami. That's no guarantee. Disclaimer, no guarantee. There isn't any definitive there.
Yeah, at this point it's basically just a theory.
It is not a known quantity at this point where these will occur, when they will occur. But what we're starting to pick up on is the uptick in activity over the southwestern ring of fire should start to transition along the rim towards the Pacific Northwest.
So you can see how we have that blank spot on the Pacific Northwest, and then you have uptick of activity along the western Pacific rim of fire. And they call it that because they also have a lot of volcanoes around there in those areas when volcanic eruptions happen. Also, earthquakes usually tend to occur shortly after. And like I said, that there's a trend or a pattern if you follow this long enough to see how things go back and forth, as in the plates shifting and correlating with different spots along the trenches and everything like that. There's really some great maps like Google Maps. You can look out there and you can see all the trenches and see exactly how these types of earthquakes happen in these subduction zones. And it's only a matter of time. I mean, they said, it's going to happen in our lifetime. Another big one for California, but it's no telling when. It's going to happen though. I'm thinking it's been a good 60, 70 years since a really big earthquake in California.
Yeah, we're overdue. And the concern
so it's locked and loaded, and it's ready to slip at some point.
And the concern there is not anyone, there's really not everyone aware of it, even though they live along the coast and live along that fault. So the best thing you can do at this point is stay informed. Better safe than sorry in this case. We wouldn't be talking about this if we didn't feel like it was a possibility coming sooner or later. So,
in other words, just take precautionary measures just to be sure, I guess you could say.
I mean, people out there, they expect them all the time. You know what I mean? But
nothing of that magnitude, though.
Right, like we're talking a possible 7.5 earthquake for the Bay Area or somewhere along the Aleutian Islands area. I'd say between Alaska and the Bay Area could be possible here within, like I said, about 14 days maybe.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, something's going to happen. I don't know how big though, because I mean, obviously, if one side of the plate is rattling 7.2, we're gonna have issues to the north and west of that area.
So,
and you can already see it's transferred south more, I think.
Mm-hmm. So starting to look around here, you can see the uptick in activity that has been present around here. That's starting to shift up to the north and west. So you're seeing areas like Indonesia and Papua New Guinea starting to gain, or rather, starting to transfer that energy. So they're starting to see earthquakes of their own. You can also see the 7.2 up by Japan. That would be right around here. They've had their own little swarm of stronger earthquakes lately. This is off the coast of Fukushima. So there is definitely that uptick in activity and potentially the beginning of the transfer as signified by the 7.2. There's still a lot of time to come with this, and there's still a lot that needs to be figured out. But the lack of energy along here is meaning that the energy should start to transfer up and around, and we should start to see an uptick in activity up and around here in Japan as we go over the next few weeks and months. And then as that goes along, the concern will begin to grow for areas like the Alaska coastline and eventually the San Andreas as quakes start to get down there. I think we might be done.
All right. So, with tonight, Tuesday evening, we went over a giveaway for our decals. And we have a few numbers that were chosen by some of our viewers, and we'd like to go ahead and do our random number generator and see who wins the first UWN decal.
I just checked something out here. 1906 was the last time California had a big major earthquake. So we're 116, 17 years overdue.
So Morgan, you want to go ahead and pull that up?
Yeah. What am I thinking of, though? Because if I remember correctly, there was a strong earthquake around the Bay Area that happened during a World Series game, was there not?
Okay, yeah, true. I'm trying to figure out how big that one is. Yeah, that was the Oakland Athletics playing against someone. I forget who it was.
San Fran Giants, maybe?
Could have been. Let me check.
So how many entries do we have? Are we doing 1 to 4 or something like that?
No, this is going to be
1 to 1,000.
Yep.
All right. We will do. So we will pull this up on my screen here. Get ready to generate. This is not the number. This is just what it came up with initially. And just make sure I have the right screens.
Yep, you do. You're good.
Okay.
It was 1989, and that was a 7.2. Morgan.
So, something of that magnitude could be what we might be looking forward to in the near distant future. That's really what we're beginning to think. But we're going to go ahead here and get this through. Generator 642.
All right, so our entry from Brian Schwartz with the number 777 would be the closest. to what we have received there.
All right. So congrats,
So Brian
Brian.
Schwartz, we will
All right, cool.
we'll be getting a hold of you here in a few minutes to go ahead and get that information from you and get this sent out to you.
All right.
Congrats to Brian.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's the first giveaway
All right.
of many more to come. I can
Oh yeah.
anticipate for the future of this page as we begin to grow more and expand throughout the future.
And as
Absolutely.
time goes on, we'll end up with more and more and better things to give away than, just
Bumper
decals.
stickers.
Yeah, pretty much. If we want to be honest with ourselves, they're basically bumper stickers, but they're weatherproof, I guess.
Yeah, why not?
I mean, they are, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
All right.
Anyway.
But with that being said, I think we can wrap this up. Shorter podcast, not a lot to cover this time. I don't think I'm missing anything. So, with that being said, we are going to sign off here. My name is Morgan J. Fold. That's Kyle and Greg on the right. And we will see you on Wednesdays now, if I remember correctly, in terms of
Yes.
the Facebook podcast, where that'll be Kyle having more updates in terms of the earthquake situation. We'll be back here next Friday for more updates on that as well. So we appreciate y'all tuning in. And until next time, we will see you on the next one.
All right.
Good one.
Take care.